You can feel it before you can explain it. People talk over you, cut you off mid-sentence, act like your time doesn't matter. They forget your name in rooms you helped build. And worst of all, they smile while doing it, like it's nothing, like you're nothing. That's the slow burn of disrespect. It doesn't always explode. Sometimes it just lingers, quiet, suffocating, invisible to everyone except the man it's happening to. Here's the part most won't admit. Disrespect doesn't always come from loud mouths or toxic people. Sometimes it starts with you, with what you tolerate, with how often you stay silent just to keep the peace, with how many times you've mistaken being passive for being wise. Stoicism values self-restraint, yes, but not self-erasure, not letting people trample your dignity in the name of patience. So if you've ever walked away from a room wondering why you were the only one not being heard, this one's for you. These are 6 brutally honest reasons people keep disrespecting you, and how a Stoic man commands respect without raising his voice. If you're ready to change the way you carry yourself, like, subscribe, and drop a comment. I won't shrink for anyone. Let's begin. 1. You excuse bad behavior to keep the peace. You've probably said it to yourself before. It's not worth the fight. You bite your tongue. You let the disrespect slide. You convince yourself that being calm, being the bigger man, is strength. And sometimes it is, but not always, because there's a fine line between being composed and being complicit. And when that line gets crossed too often, something inside you starts to dim. Not all at once, slowly, quietly, like dignity slipping through your fingers while you smile and call it maturity. Frank, a 62-year-old small business owner, knew this feeling all too well. He spent years managing his company with discipline and grace. He believed in treating people well, in avoiding unnecessary drama, in giving others the benefit of the doubt. So when a younger colleague started undermining him in meetings, subtle jabs, rolling eyes, interrupting him, Frank brushed it off. He told himself the guy was just insecure or immature or stressed. But the jabs didn't stop. They escalated. Eventually, the team stopped turning to Frank for direction. His voice wasn't just being dismissed, it was being erased. That's when he realized the truth. By keeping the peace, he had slowly handed over his authority. Not because he was weak, but because he mistook silence for wisdom. Because somewhere along the way he learned that a good man doesn't make noise, that raising your voice, or even raising your standards, was a sign of ego. But that lesson cost him something. It cost him presence, it cost him power, and it cost him the self-respect that comes from drawing a line and holding it. This is the trap so many older men fall into. You tell yourself it's noble to absorb tension, that if you just wait long enough, people will come around. But people don't respect what you tolerate. They test it. And when your silence becomes predictable, it becomes permission. Psychologically, this is known as conflict avoidance conditioning, the long-term habit of deflecting confrontation out of fear of discomfort or escalation. And while it may seem wise on the surface, it often leads to deep internal resentment, low-grade depression, and emotional invisibility. You become the man everyone likes, but no one listens to. Stoicism doesn't ask you to fight every battle. It asks you to choose the right ones, and to fight those with clarity, not emotion. A Stoic doesn't explode. He doesn't beg. He speaks when the line has been crossed, and he speaks without shaking. If someone repeatedly crosses your boundaries, the problem isn't their audacity, it's your silence. And if you want your respect back, it begins by breaking that silence, not with drama, but with calm, unwavering truth. Being quiet isn't always strength. Sometimes it's the very thing that makes people forget you were ever strong at all. 2. You overgive to be liked. Here's a hard truth backed by behavioral research. People are more likely to respect those who set limits than those who constantly overextend. That may sound counterintuitive, especially to men who grew up believing that being helpful, generous, and endlessly available would earn them admiration. But the reality is, overgiving often backfires. Instead of building respect, it breeds entitlement. Instead of being appreciated, you're used. And instead of feeling valued, you start to feel invisible. The root of this problem runs deep. Many men, especially those in their 50s and beyond, were conditioned to believe that their worth came from what they could do for others, provide for the family, sacrifice their time, say yes, even when their gut said no. Over the years, this habit of overgiving becomes a way of life. You give your time to people who don't show up for you. You lend money that's never returned. You offer advice that's ignored. And still you keep giving because deep down you believe that maybe this next act of generosity will be the one that makes you feel seen. But it never comes. Because here's the psychological reality. When you give from a place of desperation, when your kindness is fueled by the need to be liked, people don't see it as strength. They see it as weakness. They don't value you. They value what they get from you. And the more you offer without boundaries, the less they feel the need to reciprocate. You become the dependable man they don't think twice about using. From a Stoic perspective, this is the opposite of virtue. True generosity comes from abundance, not anxiety. A Stoic gives because he chooses to, not because he hopes to be loved in return. He offers his presence, his wisdom, his help, but never to buy approval. Because the moment you start giving in exchange for affection, you stop being a man of self-command and start becoming a man who is quietly begging to be accepted. The emotional cost of this pattern is heavy. Over time, it leaves you drained, resentful, and ashamed for having let it happen again. But it's never too late to change. The Stoic solution isn't to become selfish or closed off. It's to give from a full cup, one that you refill by honoring your time, your energy, your worth. You set limits not out of pride, but out of clarity. Because a man who respects himself doesn't give everything away. So ask yourself, is your kindness a gift? Or is it a transaction disguised as virtue? If it's the latter, it's time to stop. Not because others don't deserve your generosity, but because you deserve to stop bleeding for people who never once offered a bandage. Respect isn't earned through sacrifice, it's earned through sovereignty, and the man who knows that never needs to beg for it. 3. You tolerate disrespect in the name of love. There comes a point in many men's lives where the lines between love and tolerance begin to blur. You stay in the relationship. You stay in the friendship. You stay in the dynamic, not because it's healthy, but because you've convinced yourself that enduring pain is a form of loyalty. When someone raises their voice, you tell yourself they're just stressed. When they dismiss your thoughts, you say they didn't mean it. When they withdraw, you rationalize the distance. Over time, you become a master of making excuses for treatment that chips away at your sense of worth. And without realizing it, your identity starts to mold around what you allow. This isn't love, it's quiet submission dressed in emotional endurance. And while you might think you're preserving connection, what you're really doing is signaling to the other person that your boundaries are optional, that your dignity is negotiable, that they can say what they want, do what they want, and you'll still be there, arms open, pretending everything's fine. What begins as patience soon becomes permission. And the moment someone realizes they can humiliate you without consequence, they lose all reverence for who you are, not because they're cruel, but because you've shown them they can. Psychologically, this form of self-erasure is deeply rooted in the fear of abandonment. Many men, especially in later years, fear being alone more than they fear being disrespected. So they tolerate sarcasm that cuts a little too deep, affection that's given like a favor, and coldness that's never addressed. But emotional survival that comes at the cost of your self-respect is not survival, it's surrender. From a Stoic lens, love is not measured by how much you can take. It's measured by how clearly you draw the line between grace and degradation. A Stoic doesn't reject love, but he never allows it to become a justification for losing himself. He understands that true connection requires clarity, and clarity means you do not accept words that diminish you, behavior that humiliates you, or dynamics that reduce you to silence. The danger in tolerating disrespect under the banner of love is that eventually it becomes the new normal. You stop recognizing how far you've drifted from your own values. You stop hearing your own voice. And the longer you remain in that space, the harder it becomes to remember what self-respect even felt like. The answer is not to confront with rage. It's to reclaim yourself with calm precision. A man who respects himself never has to raise his voice to set a boundary. He simply decides what he will no longer absorb and walks accordingly. If you feel your silence has bought you love, ask yourself, what has it cost you? Because the longer you mistake submission for strength, the more you lose the very thing Stoicism is meant to protect, your sovereignty. And once that's gone, what you have left isn't love. It's captivity. 4. You don't know how to say no. There's a quiet way men lose power, and it doesn't come from failure or weakness. It comes from the inability to say one small word, no. Over time, this habit of constant yes-saying becomes second nature. You agree to things you don't want to do. You take on responsibilities that aren't yours. You stretch your schedule, your wallet, your energy, all to avoid disappointing others. And each time you do, something small is taken from you, not by force but by your own unwillingness to draw a line. What begins as helpfulness becomes a pattern of self-erasure. People don't ask, they expect. They assume you'll step in, show up, handle it, fix it, not because they respect your time or effort, but because they've learned you don't resist. And what they learn over time is dangerous. You're not unavailable, you're undefended. You become the go-to man for everyone's problems but your own. And the cost is subtle but severe. Resentment builds, exhaustion sets in, and worst of all, you begin to feel invisible in the very relationships you pour yourself into. Psychologically, this is rooted in a fear of being seen as selfish or unkind. For many older men, raised in cultures that equated self-sacrifice with strength, the idea of saying no feels unnatural, even dishonorable. But there's a deep flaw in that conditioning, because saying yes to everything isn't generosity, it's self-abandonment, and the more you abandon yourself, the less others feel compelled to respect you. Stoic philosophy offers a powerful corrective. It teaches that discipline is not only in action, but in limitation. A Stoic understands that every yes is a commitment of energy, time, and presence, and that those resources are finite. Saying no isn't an act of cruelty, it's an act of clarity. It means you understand your values, your boundaries, and your worth. It means you don't need to explain your decisions to everyone because your life isn't a committee vote, it's a sovereign domain. There's strength in turning down a favor when it would cost you peace. There's courage in declining a conversation that would drain you. And there's dignity in protecting your space even when others don't understand. When you begin to say no, not from anger, but from self-command, you retrain the people around you. They start to pause before asking. They start to consider your time before assuming they own it. And slowly, the respect that once felt elusive begins to return, not because you demanded it, but because you modeled it. So if you find yourself constantly overcommitted, silently resentful, exhausted by obligations you never truly agreed to, stop blaming others. Look inward. The problem isn't their audacity, it's your absence of boundaries. And the solution isn't confrontation, it's refinement. The man who knows what he will and won't allow no longer needs to prove anything. He just lives like he means it. 5. You wait for others to validate your worth. He spent his whole life doing the right thing, showed up to work early, paid every bill on time, stayed faithful in a marriage that offered more silence than support, helped friends move, lent money without asking for it back, took care of his aging parents when no one else stepped in. He didn't do it for praise, at least not at first, but somewhere along the way, he began to hope that maybe someone would finally notice, that all his quiet sacrifices would be acknowledged, that someone would look him in the eye and say, "You matter." But the thank you never came, the recognition never arrived, and as the years passed, something else took root in its place. Resentment. Not loud, not bitter, just a quiet ache that grew heavier with time. Because when you spend your life waiting for others to validate your worth, you eventually become a stranger to yourself. You forget that your value was never theirs to assign. This is the trap many men fall into, especially those who have been taught that providing, enduring, and staying loyal are the things that earn them love. You begin to believe that your worth is a debt someone else is supposed to repay. But that belief slowly poisons you, because people rarely recognize what you've made easy for them. And the more silently you carry the load, the more invisible you become. Psychologically, this pattern is rooted in external validation dependency. It's the quiet belief that your worth is something others must reflect back to you. But when that reflection never comes, the internal result is shame and self-doubt. And it doesn't just hurt, it hardens. You stop asking to be seen, but the wound of not being seen keeps bleeding under the surface. This is where Stoicism offers a brutal but necessary truth. A Stoic does not live to be praised. He does not build his character in hopes that someone else will finally say, "Well done." He builds because it is who he is. He serves because his soul demands it. He walks with honor even if no one claps when he passes. Marcus Aurelius never wrote a journal entry for applause. He wrote it because the man who seeks truth must write it down, even if no one ever reads it. So if you've been waiting for recognition, stop, not because you don't deserve it, but because you don't need it. The applause that never comes can no longer be the measure of your worth. You validate yourself by the way you carry your days, the peace you keep in your decisions, and the standard you refuse to lower, even when the world fails to say thank you. When you embody value, you stop begging for proof. And when you stop begging, you start leading, quietly, powerfully, stoically. 6. You disrespect yourself first. Here's a sobering fact. Numerous psychological studies have shown that people subconsciously take cues from how you treat yourself to determine how they should treat you. In other words, if you constantly minimize your worth, neglect your well-being, or act as though your time doesn't matter, others will follow suit, without hesitation or guilt. Disrespect rarely starts outside of you. More often than not, it begins with the quiet ways you abandon yourself. This is the truth most men don't want to face. You can demand better treatment, set boundaries, read every book on confidence. But if you still live like your needs don't matter, it all falls apart. If you chronically overwork without rest, talk to yourself with harshness, or allow your goals to collect dust because someone else's comfort comes first, you send a message to the world. I don't value me, so why should you? Stoicism teaches that self-respect is not a performance, it's a discipline. Marcus Aurelius warned, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. That means showing up for yourself consistently, not because you crave recognition, but because you understand your intrinsic worth. Epictetus reinforced this when he said, No man is free who is not master of himself. Mastery begins with honoring the most basic things: your rest, your voice, your direction. You don't need external applause to be valid, but you do need internal alignment. Because when your behavior says, "I am not a priority," the world echoes that belief in the form of disrespect, dismissal, and disregard. People pick up on your internal dialogue, even if they don't hear it. They sense when your confidence is hollow, when your boundaries are weak, and when your standards for yourself are inconsistent. A Stoic man lives by a higher code, not to impress, but to remain unmoved by chaos. He rests without guilt, speaks with clarity, expects excellence of himself, not because others are watching, but because he is. And that kind of man doesn't need to ask for respect. It arrives uninvited. So if you feel the world has been treating you like an afterthought, ask yourself this first. Have you been treating yourself like a priority? Because respect is never truly given. It is reflected. And when your reflection radiates strength, self-command, and quiet honor, people have no choice but to respond in kind. That's not ego. That's order. And order, as every Stoic knew, begins within. If people keep disrespecting you, it's not just bad luck. It's not just how they are. It's what they've learned from you, not through what you say, but what you allow. Every time you stay quiet when something cuts too deep, every time you say yes when your gut says no, every time you shrink so others feel big, you teach the world how small they can treat you. But that ends now. You don't need to yell. You don't need to beg. You don't need to prove anything. What you need is to raise your standard for how you speak, how you walk, how you carry the weight of your name. Because when a man starts respecting himself in silence, the world listens louder. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." And being one means acting with quiet strength, not desperate noise. So if this message stirred something inside you, don't scroll away like it didn't matter. Like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. My respect starts with me. Because once you carry yourself like a man of worth, disrespect doesn't stand a chance.